like to invite you to start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia. I presume you're going to press the record button. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this, and I even wore my T-shirt for the occasion. So welcome everyone from Melbourne, Australia, where it's actually quite warm. And I did some research. This year we've spent 188 days in lockdown. So it's been a challenging year for us here in Victoria. We've had over 900 deaths from COVID-19. And 820 of those are in Victoria, most of them in aged care. And we've had 28,000 cases Australia-wide, which is obviously very different to the UK. So I feel very privileged despite having been in lockdown for so long. So I'm here to give you a rousing cheer to cope with the challenges ahead. And to let you know that, yeah, it can bring lots of good things as well. I really do welcome questions. I do a lot of these types of presentations and I can go off in any direction at any time. So if you'd like to stop me, please do. Okay. What I'd like to run through is the 7 best settlement strategies, some LinkedIn hacks, LinkedIn questions, how to network in person and network on LinkedIn, and then there'll be some digital goodies at the end. Just to give you a tiny bit of background on me, I started my professional career 6 days after my last secondary school exam in 1982, and I worked full-time at Westpac, which is the first Australian bank, for 11 years before I moved to Melbourne. And I'm Australian and I speak English, and I found the transition to life in Melbourne very difficult because it also coincided with me getting a new job and then finding out I was pregnant, getting sacked when I was pregnant, adjusting to motherhood, not being able to find friends, all the sorts of things that can potentially happen when you move. So as a result of that, I did a research project and I surveyed 96 people who'd moved to Melbourne within the last 5 years. Most of them wanted a 24-hour telephone advice service. And then the next most popular option was a website, which I happened to launch in 2001. I joined LinkedIn in 2003. Basically, since I've moved to Melbourne, I haven't had a real job since 1994. So I've done a huge variety of things, including published 5 books. I'm a member of lots of associations and I help people with careers, business. I teach at the Centre for Adult Education. So lots of different things. And next year I'm going into a different foray and publishing poetry, a book called Poems for Lovers to Read to Each Other, as well as Poems for Me to Truly Be. Another really key component of my life is that I have done a huge amount of voluntary work. So I have found this to be a tremendous opportunity for me to meet people in my community, to give something back, to learn amazing things. One of the things that I did as part of Scouts was I was a parent helper at a jamboree, and I took kids out sailing on Sydney Harbour for 2 weeks. And there's not many opportunities you have to get those kind of gigs. And I was the only skipper who did not capsize the boat. So that was kind of exciting. And I do occasional free presentations as well. So what I'd like to do is just to get a little bit of a feel for who you are in the group is I'd like you to pop in the chat box, number 1, if you're looking for full-time work, and number 2, if you're looking for any work as soon as possible, get me out of the house, you know, I need something desperately, don't care if it's part-time. Or number 3, if you're continuing an international career, but you're based in Oxford, you might be working from home for an international company. If you currently have your own business or you want to set one up, you can put in number 4. And if it's something else entirely, you can put in number 5. So who's going to be brave enough to put in a number in the chat to describe who they are, just so that I can sort of tailor this presentation a bit more. Thank you, Elsa. You're looking for full-time work. Number 1 and 2, so either full-time work or anything, work and currently have your own business. Okay. Number 5, Marianne, if you'd like to just give a little bit of an indication of what number 5 is, that would also be helpful. Looking for freelance on top of a career. Yes, I encourage anybody who's considering going from straight full-time work into something else to do it on a part-time basis to begin with. It eases that transition enormously. So thank you to everybody who's put in your numbers there. That's really helpful for me. And I can see that for some of you, getting those work opportunities as soon as possible is important. So I'll make sure I focus on that. Okay, the next one. Could you please place an A if you've been in Oxford for less than 6 months, a B if you've been there somewhere between 6 months and 3 years, or more than 3 years, you can do a C. So we've got one in the B, well, quite a few in the Bs, okay, and in the As, but nobody who's been there more than 3 years at this stage. Okay, cool. All right, I actually suggest that you're a newcomer for 3 years. Now, if you've done a lot of moves, you develop strategies so that you integrate in a new community much quicker. But I would also suggest that you don't feel like a local until you've lived somewhere for 10 years. So if you're thinking, you know, I'm not quite sure if I'll ever get the hang of all of this, to feel like almost a local is 3 years, and to definitely feel like a local is about 10 years. So go easy on yourself. Next one is, how many of you would say English is your preferred language or your native language that you use all the time? And A, if it's an additional language. So we've got some A's and P's there. Okay, well, in that case, I'm really glad that Sonia is recording this session, because if English is an additional language, I've written a lot of text on the screen, but I will be showing you a lot of things as well. So you might like to watch the recording and do things again. So yes, thank you for sharing that. Sorry, you're an A, okay. All right. Now, if you would like to connect with the other people who are in this group, and the chat is not part of the recording, you can also copy and paste your LinkedIn URL from your internet browser and pop that in the chat anywhere throughout the presentation. So you don't have to do it instantly right now, but if you would like to connect with the other people in the group, just copy your URL in and pop it in the chat, and people can reach out to you. And if not, just say hi. That's perfectly fine too. There's definitely no obligation to do that. All right, so part of the research that I did when I was looking at people who've moved is I did a lot of secondary research, and I looked at all the reasons why moves fail. And then as a result of my survey, the primary research, I also came up with some issues that people face. And then what I did is I created what I call my simplistic dichotomy table, which sounds very academic, but what it was designed to do was to say, this situation is slightly more difficult than this situation. So for instance, if you're single, it can be quite often more difficult than if you have a partner and young children, because through the young children, you'll go to schools and you'll meet families that way. If you're a little bit older, like as in over 45, a lot of people have already established relationships, and it can be, again, a little bit more difficult. If you don't speak the local language, you know, all of these sorts of things can make, you know, the adjustment to a new location a bit more difficult. But the number one reason for success in moving is if you find a friend. And everybody who I ask, you know, if they've had a good move to their new location, I'll say, can you tell me the name of your first friend? And every single person I've ever asked can always tell me the name of that person who became friendly with them. Now, I'd like to let you know that most of my friends here in Melbourne are not ex-Adelaideans. They're actually other people who've moved to Melbourne. And so you're not alone if the friends you find are from other locations. Because what happens is people who live somewhere for a long time already have their life very, very busy. And so, you know, they don't necessarily find time to fit you in. So that's why I encourage all new arrivals to collect local information, find out what's available and get involved, and to start new activities. Because if you meet somebody through a shared interest, then obviously you've got something to talk about, and that will be, you know, making it a lot easier for you to connect. You do need to expect it to be challenging. So if this is like your fourth move and you think you've worked it all out, and then you find it's difficult, that can be, even harder. So just if you expect it to be challenging, then you'll be ready. But you also need to develop new routines and rituals. Now, I have no idea what it's like to only have 4 hours of daylight a day because, I live in sunny Australia. But you might decide, well, every Friday night we're going to go out for a meal, or what are we going to do for birthdays or on Christmas? And here in Australia, everybody asks you, what are you doing for Christmas? So even if you don't celebrate Christmas, and I've been hosting a Christmas Day picnic lunch for 14 years, of course I can't do it this year, so I'm just going to do an online chat. But people like to have somewhere, to say, oh, well, I'm doing this. And so, what will you do on these special occasions? It is a very good idea to ask questions. And so long as you don't ask the same question of the same person on a regular basis, people see that as a sign of intelligence if you ask good questions. And all of these steps are designed to be done in a way that you feel comfortable. So you might prefer to ask questions to your next door neighbour, and somebody else might prefer to ask questions to someone they work with. That's entirely your choice. And there's heaps more information on my website at newcomersnetwork.com. There's a couple of things in the chat. I'll just keep an eye on that. We've got some LinkedIn links coming through. Ahu, if you'd just like to go back into LinkedIn and click on your personal profile, your picture, there'll be a different URL that comes up, and then you can paste that into the chat so that we can see your link. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. So as a general principle, when you're looking for work and you're doing things online, or you're entering a job application and it goes into something called an ATS, applicant tracking system, you need to understand that all of these are databases. And so unless the information goes in, you cannot be found. So if you're going for a job and you just use the same resume every time, and you don't tailor it for the actual position you're going for, there's a very good chance that you will not meet that first search criteria, and therefore you'll miss out on the opportunity. Algorithms are equations that are designed to bring up the best search results. So if you were going for a job in mathematics and you mentioned mathematics once and somebody else mentioned it 6 times, then the algorithm will say, well, probably the person who mentioned it 6 times knows more about mathematics than somebody who's only mentioned it once. Your signals of what you do online and, how often you log in, what you interact with, what you scroll through and go through slowly, all of those things are being picked up to determine what you're like. And I'll show you later how to download a copy of your data from LinkedIn. And I recently found out that LinkedIn makes inferences about us. So when you get a copy of your data, you can see the inferences that LinkedIn has made about you. Now, the exciting news is I was born in 1965, which makes me 55, but LinkedIn believes that I was born in 1975. Isn't that amazing? So apparently I'm 10 years younger, according to LinkedIn, even though I've told them my first job started in 1982, which would have made me 7 when I started work. So it's fascinating. Any content that you put online is a version number. So the version you have now could be, let's say, version 6. And then if you update your LinkedIn profile, it'll be version 7, and it just keeps going. So you can adjust your content depending on what you're trying to achieve. You need to be strategic and you need to follow up. If you write recommendations for people, or you give endorsements, or you do online reviews, that can all help these algorithms determine what you're really interested in. You need to keep learning, you need to take action. And I personally believe that if you want to maximize employment opportunities, you would have a LinkedIn profile, absolutely. You would then, if you want to go next level, you would create a Google My Business account so that you can create your own free Google website, one page. And then if you want to go to the next level, you create your own personal website. So I've got one at sueellson.com, and that can showcase whatever I like, whereas these other platforms only allow me to put a certain amount of information in. You can see heaps of free content on my website, publications, presentations, podcasts, you name it, it's all there if you'd like to check it out. So for those of you who don't know, LinkedIn started on the 5th of May 2003. I joined on the 21st of December 2003. I'm member number 77832, which means I'm one of the first 80,000 members in the world. There are over 29 million members in the UK and worldwide over 722 million. From what I understand, the number of people logging in and using LinkedIn this year has increased, as has the amount of time everybody spends on LinkedIn. If you Google your name, it is one of, quite often, particularly if you've got a unique name, as somebody mentioned earlier, it's likely to appear at the top of Google's search results. So if people are Googling you before a job interview, and 70% will Google you before they interview you, then LinkedIn is likely to help you do that. Up to 85% of jobs are never advertised. Advertising means preparing an ad, getting the advertisement approved, publishing the advertisement, receiving 600 applications from people who, didn't tailor their application, sorting through those, etc., etc. But if you have a well-completed LinkedIn profile and they can just literally find you online and make the call, or one of your friends knows you and keeps in touch, and the workplace says, we're looking for more people, does anybody know X? And you can say, oh yes, I remember, I worked with Sonia before, and you put Sonia forward. So just keep these things in mind. A lot of business is also done by referral. So one of my clients, who was previously an academic at the University of Melbourne, she actually spent $20,000, which is at least £10,000, on a website to provide editing services for people completing PhDs. So obviously she's never going to get a huge return on that investment, but she shouldn't have spent all that money. She could have just found people on LinkedIn who were studying a PhD. She could have connected with those people and said, hi, love to connect. I offer editing services for PhDs. And she could have got plenty of work just by doing that. In my view, after years of experience in this area, the best ways to get work are through networking. So you meet people and, they pass you on, or, they get to see you. Referrals, where that person says, go and speak to Roger, and you go and speak to Roger, and the relationship they have with Roger is the same relationship you have. And voluntary work, where you get to meet people in a voluntary capacity, and then they say, oh, Sue, what do you do? Oh, well, by the way, and then you get work that way, and you get out of the house, you get dressed, all those sorts of things. And you can also do this online as well now. Now, as a result of running so many workshops, there's people who say, look, I'm concerned about my privacy. And I say it's past history. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, there's other ways to protect your identity if that's necessary. So if you've got any concerns, please feel free to contact me directly on that. If you don't know who to connect to, it really depends on your purpose. So if somebody from Bangladesh who offers website development services reaches out to me, I do not accept that connection request. But if somebody else, who has some affiliation or is based in Australia, then I pretty much say yes. So you get to choose. They do not get a notification that says you didn't accept the connection. If you think it takes too much time, you would do a cost-benefit analysis. So that's for those people who've got business. I believe that you shouldn't need to spend any more than 20 minutes a week on LinkedIn after you've completed your LinkedIn profile, which can take up to 10 hours. So I'm just warning you in advance, you wouldn't do that 10 hours in one go, but it can take a while to complete everything. If it's too costly, everything I'm showing you is on the free account, and I had the free account up until September this year. The only reason I upgraded is I wanted to see the last 90 days of people who've looked at me, to follow them up, to sort of invite them to purchase my book. So all of the things I'm showing you for the free account. If you're concerned about your English, you can just do dot points. In fact, they're preferred because it's much easier to scan and read your content quickly than it is to have huge, long narrative paragraphs. If you're scared of computers, sorry, it's a digital world we live in and we need to be across these tools. And if you're worried about your English, please get it proofread. Australia is very multicultural as well as the UK. And to be fair, I don't even notice grammar mistakes anymore, but I do need them to tell the story. So the content with those keywords that you want to be found for definitely needs to be included. Okay, so before you start updating your LinkedIn profile, it's a really good idea to collect some statistics, save a copy of your existing profile to PDF, and request a copy of your data, which you could then do every 90 days. Turn off sharing your profile edits, connect with people, and turn on your career interests. So I'm going to switch over now to LinkedIn to show you how to do these things. So firstly, when I'm working with an individual client, I always save their LinkedIn profile to PDF before I start. So I use Google Chrome. That seems to work the best, most reliably with LinkedIn. And on the 3 dots on the top right-hand side, I go into settings and I encourage people to go to advanced settings and downloads. And if it's not already, to turn this button to ask where to save each file before downloading. So now what I can do is I can go back to the LinkedIn profile, and here where it says more, I can choose save to PDF. And when I save it to PDF, the format I use is today's date back to front with a dash and then my first name, dash last name, dash LinkedIn, dash profile. And then I save it, wherever I like on my computer. And then I've got a record of what my profile looked like on the 16th of December 2020. And then after I've done a whole bunch of updates, I save it again, might be 2 days time, and then it'll be, the 18th of December. So that way, if you want to go back to something you had before, you have a record. Also, just bear in mind, you can do that save to PDF on anybody's LinkedIn profile. So if you see someone's LinkedIn profile that you really like and you would like to save it to PDF and maybe print it out, get some ideas, you can do that. Please don't print mine. It runs for about 40 pages and I don't want to waste all that paper. But yeah, you can definitely do that. The next thing is you need to request that copy of your data. So from the Me menu, you go to Settings and Privacy. And you choose get a copy of your data, download the larger data archive, request it, pop your password in and choose done. Now LinkedIn will prepare that archive. They will send you an email with a link. You need to click on that link and download those files immediately because the link stops working after 72 hours. And then you've got a list of all of your connections and everything you've done ever on LinkedIn. Now, the list of connections is really important because you might like to use that list and say, hi, Mary, I've just moved to Oxford. I'm looking for work. If you know anybody who's looking for somebody who can do these things in the UK or Europe, please invite them to reach out to me. And you could manually go through all of your connections and just give people a quick update, best wishes for 2021. And that could be a really great way to network. I've heard of multiple people who've got jobs in Melbourne via a contact in London. Hard to believe, but the world is very small now. So definitely get a copy of your data and consider following up with a few people. I also suggest that you do that about every 6 months because if you're naughty on LinkedIn, they will delete your account without warning and you'll lose all your information. So if you accidentally do something wrong, at least this way you've got some record of what you've done. Now, the next thing we're going to do is keep a record of our stats. And these stats are all real-time only. So if you download the LinkedIn cheat sheet, as it was in the slides, you would write these numbers down. So the first one you write down is you click on My Network. And obviously, I do not expect any of you to have these same numbers. So don't panic when you see them. So your My Network button will actually show you over here the number of connections, 19,662. So you just write that down. Then you go to a link called feed/followers, and you write down the number of people who are following you. And if that number is significantly more than people you're connected to, so for instance, with our previous person about all those students in Japan, they could follow you even if they're not connected to you. And so you can see I've got more followers than people I'm connected to. You can have 30,000 connections and unlimited number of followers. The next statistic is, in my view, the one that is the most important if you're looking for work or business. And that's in the dashboard. And it's this one: how many people have looked at your profile in the last 90 days? Now that number there should be over 100. And if it's not, it basically means your LinkedIn profile isn't working for you. And if you apply everything I've suggested today, then you've got a much better chance of increasing that number of views. And that way you'll know that your LinkedIn profile is now working for you. And the other number is this one over here, which is how many times you've appeared in search results in the last 7 days. And that number should be over 50. So 50 for 7 days, 100 for 90 days. Because even if you appear in search, doesn't mean everybody's going to click through and view your profile. The next one is further down on your profile, and it is the number of recommendations and endorsements you've received. So here for endorsements, my top 3 skills, LinkedIn training and writing, you would want to try and encourage at least 20 votes for each of those 3. You can have 50 skills to be endorsed. If you really want to specialize, I'd suggest only 20 that you'd focus on. But yeah, the top 3 are really what you want to happen fairly soon. And the recommendations, the number both received and given, should be at least 6 of each. So 6 that you've given to somebody else and 6 that you've received from someone else. Just keep in mind that recommendations can be used in court. So you only want to say things that you would be prepared to say in court about that person. And I usually use the example of a project manager. And I'm sure we've all worked with somebody who was excellent at being on time, on budget, achieving objectives, but they were terrible to work with. So that doesn't mean they're a good project manager. It means that you worked with them in a role, they were on time, on budget, and met objectives. You don't need to talk about their personality in your recommendation. The other statistic you might like to look at is back up in the dashboard, and that's whether or not you have an all-star profile. And that happens when you've filled in enough boxes on your LinkedIn profile. So they're the stats to collect. The next thing is some of the settings to change on your account. So I'm only going to show you the most important ones. So under account preferences, I normally suggest that you turn off autoplay videos, but this one here is really important to change. Viewers of this profile also view. So if you're looking for work and your name's Anne and somebody looks at your profile, if you leave this turned on, what LinkedIn will say is people who looked at Anne also looked at all of these other people at the same time. So that's not good for you. So you would only turn this one on late at night when you want to do some espionage and work out who else is, you're competing with. But the rest of the time you want that one turned to no. You also recommend that you add every email address you've ever had to your account, personal or work, because if you don't, you can accidentally create a duplicate LinkedIn account, which causes all sorts of problems. But also, if somebody's trying to find you on LinkedIn with your email address, then they will always come to the one account because you're only one person. So definitely recommend that as well. And the other setting that I encourage you to consider is this one, profile viewing options. So let's suggest that you've got an interview tomorrow and you know that you're going to be interviewed by Ian Smith. Okay, so you might want to check out Ian, but you don't want Ian to know that you've looked at his LinkedIn profile. So you just make yourself anonymous and then you can look at Ian and he'll never know that you were looking at his LinkedIn profile. Once you've finished, you can go back and just do personal, and then, you know, you can see who's looking at your LinkedIn profile. And also, if you do look at someone and they've seen you've looked at them, there's a 30% chance that they will then look back at you. Apologies for this. I have a niece who's trying to reach me on that other computer and it's making a very large noise. Okay, so that's the profile viewing one. You can also, whilst you're looking for work, make sure that your email address is visible to anyone on LinkedIn so that people can reach out to you. What I'd also like to quickly show you is some of the main features of LinkedIn. And believe it or not, one of the most popular items on your LinkedIn profile is your profile photo. And believe it or not, up to 60% of the time spent looking on your LinkedIn profile will be spent looking at your photo. And I encourage you to have your eyes looking at the camera and smiling with your teeth showing, and try and get your eyes on the 1/3 line. Now I'd chop off the top of my head if I did that, so I'm just a bit down, but your head should be at the top of the circle. If your head's down here, you're going to look short, and if you zoom in and put your whole face in here, it just looks a little bit overwhelming. So just try and make sure that your head's at the top of the circle and your eyes are as close as possible to that 1/3 line. Now you'll also notice that I'm wearing a high neck garment, and what that does is it frames my face. So it draws the attention to the eyes instead of to my neck, which is, you know, not relevant. I want people to look at my eyes. So that's your photo. You can also put in an image in the background here, but this is one of the most important components of your LinkedIn profile, and it's called your headline. And if I met you at a networking event and you told me you were a plumber, I would know kind of what you do. But nowadays, there's not many people who are just one thing. A lot of us are many things, but people won't remember. So if somebody came up to me at a networking event, oh, what do you do, Sue? Well, I'd say, well, I do blah, 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 blah. You know, they're going to get bored very, very quickly. So what I say is I'm just an independent LinkedIn specialist, and then we go off on a conversation from there, because that is the area where I believe I can provide the most value, and I can help people with their career or their business, and you know, that just works for me and it pays, and so that's what I'm going to give myself my label so people can remember. Now, it hasn't stopped me getting a huge variety of work. Tomorrow I'm working with a woman who's setting up a theatre film company. I've got clients who I do their websites. You know, I do all sorts of things. But the label I've given myself is LinkedIn specialist. And bonus points for anybody who knows what OG stands for. Somebody gave me that title recently. After the label, I then put in keywords that I would like to be found for. So if you Google LinkedIn Specialist Australia, I come up on the first page of Google search results. And then if you do those other words, then I can also appear in search results. And then finally, I do very bad dancing. It's called 5 Rhythms. It comes from the US. And I want people, now that I'm over a certain age, to understand that I'm still energetic and I'm up to date. So I've put in a personal interest. This also makes me a little bit more memorable. Here in the contact info, I've listed my website, my profile on the Career Development Association of Australia website, and where my books are published. And I have all of my contact details available if people would like to reach out to me. And then I've got the open to work option as well as the providing services option. So you can turn those functions on. With open to work, you can list 5 job titles and 5 locations where you'd like to work, as well as remotely. And then in services, I think it's 10 services you can offer, as well as if you offer those services remotely. If you say that the open to work is visible to everyone, you will end up with something called the green scarf around your profile photo, and it says open to work. Now, I'm not a fan of that because I feel like it makes you look desperate. So I don't have that. I just say only recruiters. It doesn't stop me from appearing in search results, so that's all good. My summary has been completed, and because a lot of people hear about me, I've made it really easy for them to contact me, and then there's all this information in there. Then I've got some featured items, and then it goes into my experience. So I don't just say independent LinkedIn specialist. I put in more keywords and I fill in lots of details. I add in videos. But what you need to do for every job you've had in the past is something like this one. So you describe your achievements first, which is anything you did well or anything over and above what you were originally employed for, the tasks, and then provide a description of the organisation, because a lot of people, you know, if you've come from another country, they won't know anything about that organisation. So when it was established and a brief introduction to it, and then if you're working there at the moment, any contact details and so on. So, and then again, you can add in media there. I can see I've got something in the chat. I'll just have a quick look over there. Original gangster, yes. And what that means is that I've been on LinkedIn a long time. So I believe it's an American expression. So I thought it was kind of cute, and I thought it would confuse people when they saw it. So that's why I put OG in there. So I've done that for all of my jobs, right back to my original career at Westpac. And what you'll notice is because my career at Westpac was so long ago, I haven't provided as much information as I could because, you know, it's so old. But what I did do is I amalgamated it. So I put in the roles and the tasks and so on. Now, if you've had gaps in employment, you can use this option. So this was when I moved to Melbourne. I was pregnant with my 2 children. I was studying part-time. I was doing contract work. You know, it was all a dog's breakfast, lots of different things. So what I did was I just grouped the whole period from 94 to 2001, and I put it in all in together with the names of some companies that I worked for. So if you've got gaps, you can say you were on sabbatical, that you were doing career research, you know, whatever you like. So that, yeah, there's nothing missing. Well, provided it's truthful. I don't want you to lie. In your education section, you can describe the educational institution. You can list all the subjects from your transcript. You can also include topics if there's keywords that you'd like to be known for. You can add in videos. Anything that you're a member of, you can add that in licenses and certifications. So here in Australia, if you work with children, you have to have a police certificate, and you also need to have something called a working with children check. So if any of those things apply, you can pop those in. And then any voluntary work, you do similar. And then finally, fill in your skills. And any organisations you're a member of, you can write that in there. Honours and awards, you can fill that in. Publications, languages, I did French at school for 5 years, so it's just basic French, but I've put that in. You can write up projects, courses, test scores. So there's all these sections. So you just hit add profile section, and the more of these sections that are completed, the better that is for you. So that's why I say it can take up to 10 hours to complete. Now, if you are not working at the moment, the algorithm will penalise you because it says you're not working, and it likes to get people who are already working into another job. So what you can do is you fix your headline the same as if, you know, you were working. But when you add in an experience, so let's say my job finished in October and now I'm doing career research. So I would say career research, LinkedIn and social media training and support. I don't know, I'm just making something up here. And I can say various, because I'm obviously looking at lots of different places. And I could say I'm in Oxford, I presume. Oh, well, Sonia, what do I do here? Do I put London? What's the closest city? Or Oxfordshire? Yes, there we go. And I say it started in November 2020. And then I can fill in, don't update my headline. And then I can fill in the description box and add that as a job. So then the algorithm thinks that I'm currently working and I'm already in the location where I'm supposed to be. And then, you know, I'll be much more open to opportunities. And I'll just try and escape out of that because I obviously don't want to pop that on my LinkedIn profile at this point. So that's what you can do if you're not working right now. You just add in a job and call it career research. If you have a company or a business, you can go over here to the work menu and you can choose create a company page. Once you've done that, it will appear on your me menu. So I've got one for Sue Ellson and I've managed to get 300 people to follow me. And so that's super exciting. So even though I'm an employee of one, I have 300 people who are interested in my content and I share that through my company page as well. And it also means I get my logo on my LinkedIn profile. So please pop any questions you've got in the chat as we go through this and I will keep powering along. So we've gone through all of those. So we'll go on to the next slide. We've changed those. Now, if you are trying to work out what you're going to do, you really need to think about what are you trying to achieve. So I've used this example if you're in usability, user design, user experience, something like that, and you would need to think of the keywords that apply to that role and how often you can put them in, and you need to log in reasonably frequently. You would then have your photo, your headline, your summary, and you only pay for premium after you've done all of the above. When you sign up for the 1 month free, they ask for your credit card, and if you don't cancel it, they keep taking it out. It's just like a gym membership. Whether you go or you don't go, they're still going to keep charging you. You would put your headline in. Do not include seeking opportunities. You put your current job title in, your past job titles, you know, do all of these things. If you're not sure about your keywords, you can check them out there. And as I said before, if you're not currently working, you can pop that in. Now, if you want to be more likely to appear in search results, you need to connect to other people. So obviously, if you want a job in Oxford, then the more people you connect to in Oxford, the better that will be for you. If you connect to me, I do have connections mostly in Australia, but I do have them overseas. I've got a number in the UK because I used to work for a company called NetExpat, who looks after trailing spouses of expats who move around the globe. So I've got a number of LinkedIn connections who work for NetExpat in the UK. So if you connect with me, you'll be able to connect with Ellson, Sally, you know, there's some other people there that you might like to call on as well. You can publish articles, which can appear in Google search results. You can recommend people, you can endorse people. Under the More menu, if you're connected to somebody, you can press Give Kudos, and that prepares a little note and it goes in the news feed and it lets everybody know what you think of that person, a nice little thank you or well done, congratulations, something like that. If you view other people, 30% will then check you out. If you follow a company, so if you're applying for a job at XYZ company, I would encourage you to follow that company because then you're more likely to appear in their search results as well. And if you log in at least once a week, then LinkedIn knows that you're actively looking. And if you're not sure how to get involved with the content on LinkedIn, that link there explains how you start by engaging, liking, commenting, sharing things. Then you curate, so you find content and share it. And the third stage is you create your own content. So I don't want to go into that today. It's more your profile today. But if you'd like that, you can definitely check that out as well. If you do, after all of this, decide to buy a premium, what you will be able to do is message people directly, even if you're not connected to them. You will appear higher in search results. You'll be able to look for people beyond those you're connected to and who they're connected to. You'll get more comprehensive analytics, like the last 90 days of people who've looked at you. You will be listed higher when you apply for a job online on LinkedIn. There's a little bit of prestige value. If you can afford premium, you're not broke. And also you still got to remember that if you don't have those keywords like mathematics on there, well, you're still not going to be found for mathematics. If you would really like to stand out above other candidates, then you need to complete your profile in full. You need to explain any transferable skills. So if anybody knows what a grip test engineer is, feel free to write it in the chat. If not, I'll answer it later. You need to stay on purpose, and that could change. You need to tell the whole story. So I work on the principle that if you don't tell, you can't sell. So if I don't explain, I achieved this, how would anybody know unless they meet me? And a lot of people are making decisions about me before they contact me. So if I don't put it on in writing, then they won't know that about me. You can reach out to people, but you can't say, hi, I've just moved to Oxford, can I work for you? That's not going to work. You need to say, hi, I've recently moved to Oxford. I've got experience in mathematics and I know you have too. Is there any suggestions that you would have for me to find a career in mathematics in Oxford? If you would like to actually go through and do these things, you could pair up with somebody else from the opportunities group and meet again in 2 weeks and discuss, oh, I'll show you yours, you show me mine, you know, and you can work together. That could really work. And somebody else, I go to between 1 and 4 events every week. I feel like I've been to like 10 a week in 2020 because there's so many things online. But you need to do something from today within 3 days. So by the end of the week, because if you don't, you probably won't change anything. That's just human nature. So I really encourage you, anytime you do go to something that's useful, take action within those first 3 days. And feel free to stalk me online, look at my profile as many times as you want, borrow ideas. I'm perfectly okay with that. If you are going to do any face-to-face networking in the future, I always suggest, particularly if you're a little bit nervous or shy, is you go up to the person who's on their own and you say, hi, my name's Sue. How did you find out about this event? And it's not, where do you live? What car do you drive? Where do you, like they're all terrible questions. So if you just say, how did you find out about this event? Oh yeah, that's interesting. Okay. And what keeps you busy during the day? So if the person is not working, they can say, well, actually, I'm looking for a job in mathematics. And then away you go. So it's much nicer than saying, where do you work? Safe topics are the weather, any sports or interests, travel, food, these are all really easy topics to discuss. Obviously, during a pandemic, we all have to stand further apart, but it's still important to maintain eye contact. And if you say, oh, I'd love to talk to you more about that later, well, then you need to follow that up. And if you connect with them on the LinkedIn app on your phone, you can actually press My Network. And when you press My Network on your phone, there's this little blue plus that appears. And what you can do is you can show up your QR code, and then the other person can use their camera on their phone to scan your QR code, and you don't even have to type anything on the phone or touch their phone. You can do all of this just with the phone if you've got the LinkedIn app. And I actually encourage you from now on, everyone you meet, just connect on LinkedIn, because Facebook friends disappears, email addresses change, phone numbers change. But if you connect on LinkedIn, in theory, you can maintain that network indefinitely. And of course, the universal language is a smile. Every culture understands a smile. And yeah, definitely encourage you to smile frequently. There's loads of links here that you're welcome to check out. I'd encourage you to follow the University of Oxford on LinkedIn, and there is also a careers service for the University of Oxford, so you might like to join that LinkedIn group and see if there's any extra support in there. At my book launch for my 5th book, I talked about some of the new features on LinkedIn. There's a video and slides you can see about all the new features on LinkedIn in 2020. They've done more things this year than they ever have. For those of you who don't know, LinkedIn was acquired by Microsoft in 2016, and they've been a bit slow to begin with, but in 2020 they've taken off with loads of new features. So that particular link talks about those. So I would like to open the floor and I'll answer the questions that are in the chat. You're also welcome to unmute and discuss your question, but I would also love to hear from you what has been most helpful to you from this session, because that's a really great way to recap some of the things you've learned. So I'll go to the chat and I'll start answering some questions. So there was a question at the very beginning. I wonder if it's okay to have non-anonymized recommendations. The only people you can recommend or they can recommend you are connections. And so you have to be connected and it has to show that person's name when the recommendation appears. Now, if it's George Blogs and he wrote something terrible, even though he's connected to you, you do not have to publish it. So you can just delete it and say, sayonara, George, and that's all done. Okay, so